At a bridal shower, I overheard my future daughter-in-law say, "Once we're married, I'll make sure she's out of our lives for good." My son laughed and replied, "She won't even see it coming." I acted like I didn't hear a thing, smiling and giving them a big wedding check, but when they tried to cash it, they found out what I had really done. I had always dreamed of my son finding someone he loved and starting a family. As a single mom, I worked 2 jobs to give him the best life I could. I thought we were close, but that day, I learned that people can change when money and power are involved. The truth came out at his bridal shower. It was held at a fancy country club by the bride's family. I showed up with a smile and a generous check, money I had saved for years to help them start their new life. On my way back from the buffet, I walked past the restroom and heard my son talking to his fiancée. "She won't even see it coming." He laughed. I froze. They were talking about me. "Once we're married," she said with disgust, "I'll make sure she's out of our lives. No more visits, no more calls. I don't want her near our kids." "Don't worry," my son replied. "She still thinks I'm her little boy. She'll hand over the check, and once the money clears, we'll cut her off. It's almost too easy." They laughed together. I felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. The son I had sacrificed everything for was planning to take my money and then push me out of his life. But I kept my cool. I took a deep breath, put on a smile, and went back to my seat. I handed them the wedding card with the check, pretending nothing was wrong. What they didn't know was that the check was from an old, closed account from my late father's estate. It was technically real, but impossible to cash, and to make it more tempting, I wrote it for $40,000, an amount they couldn't resist. 2 weeks later, my son called me, furious. "Mom, the check bounced." "Oh," I said sweetly, "that's strange. Let me check with the bank." I let him worry for a day before calling him back. "Looks like the account is closed. I'm so sorry. I'll try to fix it after the wedding." That's when it hit him. The wedding was only days away, and they had already spent money expecting to use my $40,000. Now, they were in deep trouble. The next day, they showed up at my house, looking stressed and embarrassed. My son said, "We need to talk." I replied, "About what?" Pretending I didn't know. His fiancée tried to act sweet, saying, "We just wanted to make sure everything was fine. We'd hate for you to feel left out." I looked at them and said, "So, when were you planning to cut me out of your lives, before or after the honeymoon?" Their faces went pale. My son stuttered, "What are you talking about?" "I heard you at the bridal shower," I said calmly. "You said I wouldn't see it coming. Funny how that worked out." My son tried to deny it, but I cut him off. "I was going to actually give you real money, but now you'll get nothing from me. And if you ever try to contact me again, I'll make sure everyone knows what you tried to do." I closed the door in their faces. The wedding still happened, but it was nothing like they planned. They had to cut down everything: cheaper flowers, a small venue, and a cheap dress. They even had to ask the groom's family for help, but it wasn't enough. Guests whispered about how rushed and awkward everything seemed. I had lost my son, but I wasn't going to let him take advantage of me. A month after the wedding, my son called again. This time, he wasn't yelling, he was begging. "Mom, I'm sorry, we messed up. Can we talk?" I blocked his number. Sometimes, the best revenge is letting people face the mess they made themselves. I thought that was the end of it. They'd just struggle on their own and eventually realize their mistake. But I underestimated how desperate they were. A few weeks later, I was served court papers. My own son and his wife were suing me for fraud. They claimed I had promised them $40,000 and then gave them a fake check to mess up their lives. They wanted me to pay for their emotional distress and financial troubles. I needed a lawyer. Luckily, my friend Paul was a tough attorney who knew all about fraud cases. I told him everything, and he laughed. "So, your son tried to scam you, but now he's mad because you outsmarted him? This is going to be fun." Paul took my case right away. He had me dig through old texts and emails, looking for proof that I never promised them money, and I found gold: a text from my son saying, "I don't want your money, Mom. I don't need your help anymore." Perfect. Paul also requested their financial records to see what kind of mess they were in. Turns out, they were drowning in debt. They'd been blowing money for months: credit card debt, personal loans, and even a $15,000 wedding dress they couldn't afford to pick up. They had tried to cash my check before the wedding and spent money they didn't have, assuming it would clear. By the time we went to court, my son and his wife looked terrible, stressed and exhausted. Meanwhile, I was calm and ready. Paul laid out the entire story: how I overheard their cruel plan, the failed check, their reckless spending, and finally, he played my son's own text message: "I don't want your money, Mom. I don't need your help anymore." The judge looked tired of it all. He turned to my son and his wife and said, "You built this case on the idea that you were promised money, but all the evidence shows you were never promised anything. You assumed, spent recklessly, and now you're blaming your mother. Case dismissed." I thought that would be the end of it, but that night, My car tires were slashed, my house was egged, and I got a message from a blocked number saying, "You'll regret this." I reported everything to the police, but without proof, they couldn't do much. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore, it was war. The next morning, I got a call from a woman I didn't know. She said, "You don't know me, but I know your daughter-in-law, and you need to hear this." I tensed up. Who is this? Let's just say I've been in your shoes, and you're not the first person she's tried to scam. My stomach dropped. Meet me at the diner on 8th Street, I have proof. I decided to go. I met the woman, Danielle, at the diner. She looked tired and upset. "I was engaged to your son's wife before she met him," she said. My eyes widened. Engaged? Yes, she made me believe we were building a life together. I gave her money to help start a business, about $80,000. My jaw dropped. But there was no business, Danielle continued. She used the money for vacations, expensive things, and even cheated on me. She left me broke and ruined my credit. I shook my head in disbelief. And now she's doing it again, to my son. Danielle's eyes were serious. You have to get him away from her. She won't stop until she's taken everything. I realized then that Megan, my son's wife, was more than just greedy, she was a skilled scammer. And if she had done this before, she would know how to hide her tracks. Maybe that's why she was suing me, to silence me before I exposed her. I looked at Danielle. Do you have proof? Yes, she said. I kept all the texts, emails, everything. I even tried to take her to court once but couldn't afford it. I called my lawyer, Paul. We have a problem. Megan has done this before, and I have someone who can prove it. Paul replied. Meet me tomorrow. We're going to make sure she can't do this again. I spent that night digging through records. I found an old lawsuit against Megan for unpaid loans. I also found photos of her with other people, pretending to be in relationships, and there was even a post on a forum from someone else warning about a woman just like Megan. I saved everything and sent a text to my son. We need to talk. I know what Megan has done. If you don't listen to me this time, you'll regret it. It took a full day, but then my phone buzzed with a text from my son. Meet me at our old coffee shop tomorrow, alone. When I showed up, it wasn't my son waiting for me. It was Megan, and she didn't look happy. I walked into the coffee shop, expecting to see my son. Instead, Megan was there, sitting in a corner with a cappuccino she didn't seem interested in drinking. She looked perfect as always, hair done, makeup flawless, but her eyes were cold and empty. She didn't even pretend to be nice, just stared at me, unblinking. Where's my son? I asked, keeping my voice calm. She shrugged. He's not coming. I didn't sit down. So, you showed up instead? Trying to block me from talking to him? She gave a small, mocking laugh. No, I'm here to warn you. Her nerve made my blood boil. Warn me? Yes. She took a sip of her coffee, like we were just chatting. You're making a big mistake. You don't want to push this any further. I finally sat down, not because I was scared, but to show her I wasn't backing down. Oh, Megan, I said with a smirk, I know everything. Her jaw tightened. Danielle told me all about you. I found the lawsuits, the unpaid debts, the warnings online. If you don't leave my son, I'll make sure he knows exactly who he married. She tried to stay calm, but I could see her losing control. Do you really think he'll believe you over me? She scoffed. I think he'll have a hard time ignoring your long history of scamming people. That hit a nerve. She slammed her cup down and glared at me. Listen to me, you bitter old hag. I raised a finger. Watch your tone, sweetheart. You're supposed to be the sweet, loving wife, remember? She forced a smile. Fine, let's get to the point. What do you want? I want you out of my son's life. She actually laughed. That's not happening. Then I'll ruin you. Her smile vanished. You already tried and failed. My name is on everything, the house, the accounts. You really think he'll choose you over me? That stung because, deep down, I knew she might be right. She had my son wrapped around her finger. You want a war? She whispered. Fine, just know, I play dirty. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and looked down at her. You should have done your homework, sweetheart. So do I. I didn't go home. I went straight to my son's house and banged on the door until he opened it. He looked exhausted and irritated. Mom, what the hell? Sit down, I said, pushing past him. If this is about the lawsuit, no, it's about your wife being a professional scammer. He looked at me like I was crazy. Seriously? This again? Yes, and if you don't believe me, look at this. I shoved my phone in his face, showing Danielle's messages, the court documents, and the warning posts. His face changed, confused, then shocked, and finally, worried. Where did you get these? It doesn't matter. What matters is that this is who you married. Wake up before she ruins you. He tried to brush it off, but I could tell doubt was sinking in. Before he could say anything else, the door opened, and Megan walked in. She saw us and froze. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound innocent. I crossed my arms. I showed him everything. Her hands clenched, but her face stayed calm. "Tell me it's not true," my son demanded. Megan forced a laugh. "Oh my God, is that what she told you? She's trying to destroy our marriage." But he wasn't buying it anymore. "Then why are there legal records of you being sued?" Megan's mask slipped, and she snapped. "Grow up." "So I had exes, so what? That doesn't mean I scammed anyone. Maybe your mom should stop meddling in our lives." My son looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Did you ever even love me?" She couldn't answer. That silence told him everything. He left her. The divorce was messy and public. She tried to take everything, but my lawyer made sure she got nothing. In the end, I thought I'd feel victorious, but I didn't. I just felt empty. I'd saved my son from a con artist, but in doing so, I lost a bit of him too. It took time for us to rebuild our relationship, but we eventually did. One thing was certain, I wouldn't let anyone take advantage of me or my family ever again.